Hello and welcome to episode 449 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I am Mike Sollosi, and congratulations, listeners, you made it to the end of the year. It has been a pretty good year in some ways related to video games, and I'm not going to comment on any other way the year was good or bad. But we're going to talk about the video games of 2024 in this podcast episode, specifically the RPGs and possibly visual novels or adventure games. But I'm not alone in doing so. Who are joining me today? They are John Logan.
Hello, everyone.
Josh Lindquist.
Hey, folks.
Wes Iliff.
Hi, everybody.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hello.
Jono, Josh, Wes, Zach. I hinted at it a little bit, but 2024 was pretty loaded for RPGs. I felt like at the beginning of the year, there were 5 games coming out in January and February that I wanted to play urgently. And then by the end of the year, there were more announced games or confirmed games that made like October and November maybe even denser than that blitz at the beginning. I felt like normally I'll target like 4 or 5 games I want to play in a given year, and this year there were more than I could afford, which is a great problem to have, I guess, but still made me like worry about my time management skills. Am I the only one that thinks this was a very banner year, or am I just way too excited about a few of these specific games?
No, it definitely was. I've been working here for a while, and we're going to be putting out like our editor's choice picks at some point after this podcast releases, and I'm going to be able to make like a real top 5. Like, I've played so many games that actually came out this year, and that is not common, and it's because there have been so many games that I've wanted to play and that I have played, and there are more that I want to play, which we'll talk about. But like it's very top heavy in some ways, but also extremely deep. It's been a great year for RPGs.
Yeah, it's bringing 2017 to mind, which is often conjured up, but just how spoiled we were with amazing RPGs is pretty ridiculous.
We've had a good few years, actually. The last few years have been pretty good in terms of games after the initial fallout from the pandemic dropped off, where game development stopped because of the pandemic. Everything picked up, and since then it's been a pretty solid couple of years, and this year was another one.
I sincerely believe that at least a couple of the big releases this year were intended to come out earlier, but then received pandemic delays. I don't want to speculate on exactly which ones, but yeah, like both in the AAA space and the sort of, AA mid-budget space and indie games, there was a lot of quality on all of those fronts. But we're going to do this how Retro Encounter does it every year. We're basically going to make this into a show and tell episode. Everyone on the panel here picked 2 of their favorite games for the year. We're going to take turns talking about all of them, and that gives us a pretty good list of 10. Then we might just tack on a couple at the end and maybe talk about 2025 a little bit, but we're leaving most of that discussion for a random encounter episode that's also coming out very soon. Actually, I think when this airs, that episode will also be out. So, normally I put this at the end of the episode, but Jono, you hosted a most anticipated games episode of Random Encounter, and listeners should check that out as well as this episode.
Yes, there was Zach and Wes were also on that episode.
Let's see. I mean, we have 10 excellent games here. But does anyone want to go first in this show and tell episode?
I can. Just to talk about one of the early year big games. And that is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I know not everyone on this podcast agrees with this. But I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was, on the whole, a triumph. I think that the character writing in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was just phenomenal. And it took like all these characters who were kind of expressing themselves in these weird polygonal ways that were also like sort of reminiscent of pixel art, into like these fully fleshed out, beautiful, full characters. They even made like Kate Sith, which I think is the official pronunciation now, like an interesting character. And it for the most part, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth does a great job of like recreating the moments that recreating the moments that you appreciate, that you love, but like also making them even grander. And Final Fantasy VII was already grand to begin with, but it does a great job of making them feel even bigger and even more epic, but also just bringing so much character work. I think about characters like Yuffie, who is like basically a non-entity in Final Fantasy VII Original, and she is just such a such a joy in Rebirth, and I think that she's phenomenal. I think that the moves they made with the combat were really smart. I know that the combat can still be frustrating for some people, but for me, like, even as a person who was legitimately not good at the combat at all, like, I really appreciated having to sort of engage with its systems and learning the different ways that it worked, and it looked great. And I'd say that 85% of the mini games were hit for me, and that helps because there was a lot of mini games in this game. But like, it's just, there's such an epic sweep to this game and such great character work and such great, to me, storytelling. And I loved the ending. I know it's not a common opinion, but I loved the ending. And I just think that it's, to me, it's like the peak of the Final Fantasy VII, greater cinematic universe.
Now, I don't want to talk about the ending on this episode. We don't want to go deep into spoilers in any of these games we're talking about, and we have a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth spoiler cast from earlier this year for exactly that that topic. But I'm inclined to agree with you, Zach. Final Fantasy VII is gorgeous. It plays smoothly. It incorporates a lot more open world elements compared to remake, and it almost all succeeded. There was parts of the game where they would change the gameplay from the typical party combat that I would just not enjoy it as much.
Mhm.
But a lot of that was either optional or, except for one segment that I'd prefer not to talk about.
Even the part with the Kate Sith dungeon where you're tossing boxes, that part
Yes.
sucked.
Yeah, that's my least. The solo Kate Sith
Agreed.
dungeon is the part of the game I dislike the most by a large margin. But they give you so many things to do that have tangible rewards, and they give shine to every character. Like, I don't think anyone feels ignored in this game. And even minor characters from Final Fantasy VII that were complete afterthoughts before, like Johnny or Dio or even Biggs Wedge and Jesse, are so likable and spotlighted in this game that it takes everything that we loved about Final Fantasy VII and just gives it this incredible layer of polish with great writing that has me even reinterpret what I remember about FF7, because something would happen in Rebirth, and then I would be a little puzzled and like, was that in FF7? Go back and look, and I was like, oh, that kind of was in FF7. It's just better communicated in this game. And I mean, when it's all said and done, the 7 remake trilogy, or however many games it ends up being, is going to be at least a definitive version of the FF7 story. And so far, it's awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. It was the second of many 80+ hour games I played this year, so it's not really for the faint of heart. If you want to do most of the stuff in there, it's going to be a very long time. And the combat was good. I only really struggled with a couple simulation battles and special summon trials. Did you get the final summon at the end, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I did Gilgamesh. It was not. I was not good, but I did it.
That's where I hit a wall. Was the battles leading up to Gilgamesh. But yeah, no, this is it's a really, really stellar AAA RPG. And I mean, when the third game in the trilogy eventually is on the horizon, it's going to be the most anticipated game for many of us.
Yeah. And very quickly, I just want to quickly hop on something you said there. I think that one of the things that I loved most about this game is that it felt true to Final Fantasy VII. Like, Final Fantasy VII is a weird, goofy game with all these weird mini games that like why are we doing this? But it's also part of the charm of it. And like, I think that is imported here. And I know that some people think there are too many mini games and there's too much gamification, but like, to me, that is the spirit of the game to me. And I think that they made most of them a hit. So yeah, I agree.
It's funny because I have a lot of problems with this game. The mini games and the number of mini games aren't one of them. I guess it's the Yakuza influence in me being like, yeah, mini games, bring them on. Like, I think that some of the mini games in this thing are fabulous. Queen's Blood's great. I think they did a great job at Chocobo Racing. I actually really enjoyed the piano mini game. I enjoyed finding the pianos and learning the songs and things like that, because I guess I really like a rhythm game. There are a few mini games in this that I thought fell a little bit flat. Fort Condor could have been better. I appreciated the idea and the aesthetic of it, but it didn't quite land for me.
It was also really hard.
It was really hard. There were a few
Yeah.
that were just like really friggin' tricky. I have quite a few problems with this game, but I don't want to. This isn't the podcast for that. But I will tell you what I liked about it. I thought the combat. I agree. I was not good at it, but I thought the combat was excellent. Phenomenal mix, just like the original of a turn-based combat system and the action RPG combat. At the same time, I appreciated how they expanded it and built it out a little bit more. Graphically, just utterly stunning, beautiful locations, beautiful world, beautiful villages. The music in this game is, I mean, it's unbelievable what they took an
Yes.
already brilliant soundtrack and they expanded it into something that is even more epic, if that is possible. um and there were some issues with the game. I think, oh cripes, what's it called? The glide to chocobo mini game. Ooh,
Oh,
that's
the Cosmo Canyon gliding.
yeah, ooh,
Yeah.
did not
Yeah.
enjoy that at all. The game has, in my opinion, it's not my game of the year, not even close. But what is great about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is so astoundingly good. Like, arriving to Golden Saucer is everything that I hoped it would be. When I thought, oh, we're going to the Golden Saucer in this game, I wonder how they're going to
That
expand it.
scene
And
is delightful.
it's so good.
It's so good.
It's so amazing. I think the highs of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are just exceptional. I think it is a much more uneven game than Remake. I liked Remake. I didn't adore it. Like, I liked it. I had some problems with the combat system, but I thought that was a much more consistent game in terms of the story it was telling, the writing, the coherence of it. Whereas this is much more open world esque, and because it's so much more open world esque, there are a lot of misses and there are a lot of hits. That being said, it absolutely deserves to be on Games of the Year list. It's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it's an astonishing achievement for Square Enix.
I think saying that the highs are super high in this game, and I agree. And I think that it has some serious lows, but like I think the highs overwhelm the lows. So I think that's a good way of putting it.
I'm one of those who didn't get who had some issues with the game, but I think that the comparison that keeps popping up in my head is this is kind of, if you look outside of the RPG realm, this is almost the Arkham City to the Arkham Asylum in the Batman series. And that the first Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was a little bit more tightly paced. It was very much directing you through more of a guided storyline, whereas this one opens things up in a big way. And I think in a lot of ways that works toward its favor. I mean, it makes sense once you get out of Midgar, things open up in the original game. This absolutely fits the spirit of that. And sometimes I think it works really well. There are areas that are harder to traverse than others, and some of those might drag the game down a little bit. But I'm completely on board that, despite me getting a little bit overwhelmed by some of the mini games, a lot of them are so good. I could play Queen's Blood forever. You could make a standalone Queen's Blood game, and I'd be there day one.
They put an
I'm a little
entire
surprised
Red
they haven't.
13 Rocket League in the game.
Right?
Mhm.
I was terrible at it.
It's so
Um,
fun. It's so fun.
I got way too good at speedrunning the box breaking Tifa mini game because I know one of her scrolls was a reward at the end of it, either a scroll or a weapon, I forget. But there were so many mini games, but also that is sort of fitting the spirit of FF7, because FF7 was one of the first RPGs to
Right.
throw a dozen plus mini games at you with things
Mhm.
like everything in the gold saucer and the snowboarding and dolphin
Bike
jumping.
races and
The dolphin jumping in Rebirth is crazy. Also, it's
it's way better than it is in original.
yeah, no kidding. But I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on any one particular game since we're getting to 10 plus. But this game represents very well on our Game of the Year list. I'm not going to say what is RPG Fans Game of the Year on this podcast because that article's not out yet. But this was a contender for certain. Does anyone else want to move on with another game on our list?
Unicorn Overlord. Probably my favorite game of like the decade. um, so I was caught off guard a little bit. It was sort of Vanillaware announced this strategy game, and it has a really weird name. And then you look at the gameplay, and I start to get excited that it looks like Ogre Battle. But it's one of those things where I don't want to get too excited about a spiritual successor. It might not be good, or maybe I'm misinterpreting what this game's actually going to be based off screenshots and very short trailers. But it ended up exceeding every expectation. I mean, aside from just having the Vanillaware art style, right? It is reviving a type of strategy game that has not been seen almost at all in over 20 years. and basically is a situation where the spiritual successor is surpassing its inspiration in almost every way. I could probably argue that Ogre Battle has better writing or better story, but that's about it, right? Like I've put almost 100 hours into this game. I put about 50 hours into it to review it, and then immediately started again. And I'm still playing that second file. Now it's like 8 months later, and I'm still just going back to it every once in a while to play a little more and see just what feels like nearly endless content in a strategy game, which is just kind of bizarre. To just constantly run into more and more, and to just continue to find new strategies, new ways to build units. Uh, like I could probably, I probably have already talked about it on other podcasts for near it like endless amount of time. Uh, but I just love everything about the game. Right? Like I can forgive the story being kind of tropey, basic, uh, just because it is providing what I feel like is the best strategy RPG gameplay systems in 20 years.
Josh, do you know how many hours you put in?
So according to my little Nintendo in review thing, it said 94 hours.
That's pretty good.
I played about 50 hours to review it. And that was me rushing through the game, right, to get it done. And so I didn't see all the side content, right? Especially for like the second half of the game, I just kind of had to skip over a lot of optional content. So there's entire like side story arcs, whole characters I had never met, classes I had never gotten to use. And that's where now I'm just much more slowly and more intentionally going through every region, finding everything, and just finding that there's twice as much game there as I initially thought, right? That with another near 50 hours of gameplay, I'm only about halfway through the story.
Yeah, I haven't played Unicorn Overlord because the Ogre Battle games of the SNES and N64 days overwhelmed me, and I hated them when I was a kid. But here's what I will say: my wife is like a super hardcore story lover, Alana, if you know who I'm talking about. She loves those things, and she thinks the story of Unicorn Overlord is terrible, and she still gave it like an 8 or a 9 for her review site because she thought the combat was so good. So like that's a pretty big recommendation in my world.
Unicorn Overlord definitely hit my game of the year list, probably at the top, for a lot of reasons. One, Vanillaware is freaking phenomenal. We actually had a Retro Encounter episode about it a couple of months back. But this one's impressive to me because I was always intrigued by the Ogre Battle games, but I never actually like spent any time with them because I would try them and they would just feel impenetrable to me. And something that Unicorn Overlord does, something that Unicorn Overlord does so well is that it like gently introduces you into this style of game. You start out with just a couple of units, and the size of those units is locked to be very small, and you slowly unlock over time the complexity of it, and then it adds layers that Ogre Battle never really had, like kind of programming your own tactics and AI for your characters and for your larger units, which ends up with like this really dense interactivity, especially if you're playing later in the game on higher difficulties and you've got upwards of 8 separate units all filled with 5 people each, all interacting in unique and interesting ways. It's absolutely a joy. Even if the plot might not be like the strongest in the world, it's solid. It's the traditional heroic fantasy tropes kind of fed into each other, and aesthetically gorgeous because it's Vanillaware. What are you gonna do? And the gameplay is just pristine. Like I did not game as much as I should have this year, considering the amount of absolute bangers that came out. But this one kind of pierced the fog and completely dominated my life for about a month and a half.
It's almost like you have children.
It's crazy, right?
I don't know.
Well, I didn't have children for the month of June. So.
Yeah, I'll just kind of just add on about just it's impressive how accessible they made all these systems, because like that's not even like it's a big ogre battle problem, um, but it's kind of a strategy and tactics games problem in general, right? You spend a lot of time in menus. There's a whole bunch of systems, and it can kind of just get all thrown at you, often without very good tutorials. Like Ogre Battle 64 literally just has a tutorial option on the main menu where you just have to play the game while they explain it all to you as you play, right? But it's totally separate from the main game. Um, and then beyond that, you just have endless menus that you can flip through to learn all this nuance. But Unicorn Overlord just gives it all to you a little bit at a time without it feeling like overly tutorially, right? You just play the game and things unlock, and it all just kind of feels natural. And like Wes said, it's once you get to the end of the game and you feel like you understand how it all works, but then you'll end up like triggering these really cool combos, and you'll just be like, how did that happen? And you have to go back and look at like every item you've equipped on every character in relation to where they're placed in a unit, and it sounds really complicated when you say it out loud like that, but when you're in it, it's it just feels great. uh, Something that I love about the game is it feels like you're never in a situation where you're absolutely going to lose. Like if you think hard enough about what you're doing, you can change your strategy and win the battle, for each individual battle, or like at the very least not make it a major loss, right? You can go into something and the game will just tell you up front, this is a game over, and you can go in there, rearrange your units, equip a different sword, a different accessory, and win.
I've always maintained that they're obviously RPGs, but they are very close to war sims essentially, and that explains the number of menus that you have and like troop management and like there's a real sim aspect of a lot of strategy and tactical RPGs out there that make it way more in depth. Not all the games obviously, but can offer way more depth than most other JRPGs and things out there. And this game seems like one of them, but it sounds like it does it in such a way that it makes it incredibly accessible to players.
It follows that old Super Mario routine of like it's trying to teach you the game as you play the game, but
Mm.
trying to be as less obvious than it could be. It just
Mhm.
introduces you into scenarios that naturally encourage you to play a certain way, and then it starts layering on top of that, which is always fantastic when a game can pull that off, especially in the tactical RPG space.
Yep. I still maintain it as the most suggestive title of the year by far.
Unicorn Overload?
That's not the name of it. You know it.
I think a lot of us didn't know that when it was announced. At least we tried our best.
Thruple Overlord?
I think I might have accidentally written it as Overload, either on social media or in Slack at some point.
I hope so.
You're not the only one who's done that in Slack, just for the record.
Yeah.
I could totally see, like, in like the 1990s, if a game called Unicorn Overload was released, that there could have been some very upsetting misunderstandings at the video store for people who reserved the game.
Or very exciting.
Or
Very exciting for
maybe,
the child.
or maybe
yes.
those two words sound the same in Japanese, and it's a Bart's Butts scenario, and both names are correct. But okay, if we're getting into alternative pronunciations and spellings of this game, I think we need to move on to another topic. John and Wes, you haven't shared a game from our list yet. Who'd like to go next?
Sure, I'll go ahead. I'll take. Do I want to let's save the big one for the end. I'll talk about something a little smaller off the top, and that is Fallout London. So this is not my game of the year, but this is something that I feel deserves a little bit more attention. So earlier this year, Fallout London got released, and it was a highly anticipated total conversion mod for Fallout 4. Now, mods and Fallout games and Elder Scrolls games and Bethesda games in general, they're inseparable. Like a lot of the reason why these games have existed and have been so consistently popular for so many years is because of mods adding in new experiences, rebalancing characters, new items, and in many cases, new quests. But total conversion mods that make completely new games are rare. Lots of them are announced, but it turns out they're hard to make and they take a lot of time. So just the fact that that Fallout London got released is astonishing. The fact that it's really, really, really good is even more so. So, uh, if you've ever played a Fallout game, you know the basic mechanics of it. It starts in like some kind of an underground bunker in the case of most Fallout games, a vault. Then you go up and you come onto the wasteland on the surface and you explore and you get involved with all of the factions up there. A lot of player choice, and then you change the world around you. And this game does exactly that, but with a UK flair to it. It takes everything about the Fallout games, including the UI, and replaces it with a UK inspired user interface that pays homage to like the 1940s and World War II, and also their version of worrying about the Cold War. The city itself of London, I don't know if anyone's visited London, but like you walk through this London, and it's obviously not a 1-to-1 match, but you like all of the landmarks that you can think of, they're all there. And they Team Folon, the group that did this, created an astonishing amount of custom elements, custom graphics, items, new locations, new textures. They created entirely new races that have never been seen in Fallout before, and everything about it feels remarkably lore accurate. Now, as someone who was decidedly disappointed when Fallout came out earlier this year, the Amazon Prime TV show, and Bethesda literally shrugged and was like, "We guys still have Fallout 76 if you want some of that." And I was like, "No, I don't want that, thank you." And apparently, not a lot of other people did either. The fact that this game came out and was as good as it was, despite the fact that it was made by a group of quote unquote amateurs who had never really made a game before, and it was this good and this polished, and the story was this compelling, and the side quests, everything, it just came together so beautifully. It feels like a Fallout game. It feels exactly like a Fallout game. And if you are looking for that experience, if you're looking for that little dopamine hit whenever you find a new location and the ding comes up, or if you want that moral choices that actually you're like, okay, lesser of two evils time, I highly recommend it. And also, if you own Fallout 4, it's free. It's a mod. You can get it off GOG. And it's not, you don't have to pay for it. You just download it, and they have a whole installer that installs over top of your installation of Fallout 4. And I was so impressed with this. I had such a great time with this. Again, not the best Fallout game. I would say it's not as good as Fallout 4, but it's way, way, way more than a DLC size package. This is a full game.
But it's you can use a legit storefront like GOG to install it, and you don't have to go like really into the weeds of Nexus mods or something
Yeah, exactly.
to figure it out. Okay, that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
Like
they came up with this whole thing with GOG where it's listed on GOG as a game. Like, they're not getting paid for it, obviously, but it's listed there as a game.
huh.
Frankly, the fact that Bethesda didn't embrace this, I think Bethesda owes so much of their success to modding, and they're embarrassed by it in a lot of ways. And this, like, if they ever wanted a paid mod, this would have been a paid friggin' mod. Oh my god, it's such an astonishing achievement for these folks.
So my only question is, how much base building is there?
Okay, I will say that base building is in this. They use the same system as in Fallout 4, so exact same structures. Apparently, a lot of the mods. Oh, that's another cool thing. Fallout London built in a lot of mod support into the mod, so a lot of the mods that are designed to fix the problems with Fallout 4 are also compatible with this mod, which is great. So, like, a lot of the things that improve base building work with this.
But does it have the customizable vending machines from Fallout 76?
I don't think so. No.
All right, never mind. Next game.
No, I'll tell you what, Sollosi, it does have a replacement for dog meat. It's a British bulldog named Churchill, who is a very good boy.
Okay, maybe I'm back in. The last time I was interested in a Fallout game was when Fallout 3 literally took my hometown in Northern Virginia and made it into a cannibal enclave. So it's been a while since I've cared about Fallout, but I don't know. I mean, I know Fallout was disappointing to some people. It did not make the positive splash that 3 or New Vegas did in my memory. But if this, takes that framework and makes it into something special, maybe it is something special. But I mean, I already wasn't connected to Fallout very strongly,
Yeah.
so naturally I didn't play this game.
It's very impressive for a total conversion mod, and this thing has been in the process for many, many years. And there are lots of other proposed total conversion mods for the Fallout games, and there are a few that have been released for New Vegas and for 3. I think this is the first massive one for 4. Um, I think 4 is a great game. I think that it's even better when you use mods, but I think it's a great game. It's solid, and this uses 4 as its foundation. So the mechanics of 4, the balance of 4, that's the basis for the game, and then it's developed there, and it has everything. It has base building. It has some really, really, really great companions, including an Oliver like street urchin, and there's a very upper class British ghoul who is slowly going feral throughout the game as he's your companion. Uh, Really, there's some compelling writing here too. And the modeling work is really impressive because in my mind, that's, as you said, Sollosi, like your hometown was converted. That's one of the joys of playing a Fallout game is visiting real world locations and seeing these post-apocalyptic versions of them. And you can go all over London and see post-apocalyptic versions. Like Tower Bridge, for example, is now entirely inhabited by cannibals, who are called the Beef Eaters, and they wear like,
Huh.
yeah, it's very funny and very clever too. Like the bobbies are the army for the entire for the country, I guess you can say, and they're decked out as British police. It's clever in a way that Fallout has always been clever. It's very true to the type of gameplay and the lore. It's not. I don't think it's. I mean, obviously Bethesda decides what's lore and what's not, but this is very lore friendly to a degree that I if they decided to make it like an official entry, it would fit. So yeah, and it's free. So if you loved Fallout or Fallout 4 and you're looking for more of that, and Starfield really didn't hit the spot, this is a real, real great place to park. And even better, it has just as many bugs as an actual Bethesda game. Although they have an excuse because they are, not actually a professional gaming company.
But it really completes the experience.
It really does, absolutely. Falling through the map is like Fallout class. You're just like, wee, okay.
It adds a note of authenticity in case you forgot that you're playing a mod of a Bethesda game.
Yeah, exactly. Or a broken quest or that kind of thing. And when I played it very near the start, so there were some broken quests where you had to use some console commands to get through. I understand that those have been fixed since then. So unlike Bethesda, they actually support their game. But that was mean. But yeah,
Not false, but
I didn't say it was wrong. I said it was mean. Yeah, I think in terms of fan achievements this year, because that's we for very good reason we do focus on the professional gaming scene, but there are a lot of fan games out there and aspiring game makers, and Fallout London is just something that I think should be celebrated. That a group of passionate fans and talented folks got together and they made a labor of love that was this feature complete and frankly good, and they did it for no money. They just did it for joy and love and wanting to create something. And I just kind of wanted to celebrate that at the end of the year because it's been a hard year for a lot of people and a lot of fans, and this is something I think that's really something that we can all be proud of in a way.
All right, so that was Fallout London from Jono. Now, Wes, the 2 games that you're bringing here are 2 that I have played that I almost selected for my own pair for this episode. So take your pick of which one to talk about next, because I am fired up no matter which one is first.
I think we got to start with Visions of Mana and save the other one. Mana? I don't know what they say in the intro.
I go with Mana.
Visions?
Visions of Mana?
Interesting. Okay.
Zions? Trials of Mana was a really exciting entry into the series because basically the switch to 3D has not been super kind to the series in general. But when that Trials remake came out and it actually like felt like a Mana game in 3D, and it took the basis from maybe the most beloved entry prior to that point, and just made it prettier and play a little bit snappier. Yeah, the lack of multiplayer is a bummer for those of us that were around in the SNES days, but it's more than made up for by just being a quality product. So the hopes for Visions of Mana were relatively high, hoping that we had actually hit a nice parity. We had hit finally like a good level for the Mana series to continue. But there was definitely plenty of doubt levied at it. And I feel like while it is not like the game of the year contender that necessarily like it, some people think it could have been, I think it is just a perfect example of the Mana series as it should exist today. I mean, if we got things that were, kept up to date with their contemporaries about this level, I would be over the moon, because I want there to be space for RPGs like this again. These that are not like, they're beautiful, but they're not, you know, a massive unwieldy amount of budget thrown into the development of visuals and whatnot.
They're not Final Fantasy VII Remake.
They're not Final Fantasy VII Remake, exactly. It's the scale and ambition that you would see out of a lot of like higher quality PS2 games, but up at modern standards. And it reminded me a lot of my favorite entries of that era, in that there's some straightforwardness to it, but there are still some experimental bits with like character growth and job classes and all of the stuff that are really fun to play with and can make replays really entertaining. You have this nice broad cast of characters who all play pretty differently and even have multiple different play styles thanks to that class system. You've got a story that, while it has its ups and downs, it's not a complete heavy hitter in the genre. It's still told well. It's still got plenty of lovable characters that are well worth your attention, and it's just kind of fun and joy to play, which not every RPG is. Even great ones can lack that little spark of joy. But Visions of Mana has it in spades. It is an uplifting kind of a game, even when the story goes into some dark places. I desperately want this series to continue, because if we can keep getting things like Visions of Mana, I think that this series is alive and well. I'm curious because I know this hasn't been like an unmitigated hit for everyone, but it absolutely struck me. It tickled my nostalgia button in a way that I cannot possibly express.
God damn it.
I have several notes, piggybacking off multiple points that Wes made. First of all, you said how this reminds you of several of your favorite PS2 games, and I think this is almost an ideal mid-budget game. This does not have the scale or scope or budget of something like a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or a Metaphora Fantasio or a Dragon Age Veilguard, but it really does have character and great ideas and executes on almost all of those ideas. And so like you can sort of feel it as you're playing. It's like, yeah, okay, this is not as beautifully pixel perfect realized as a huge expensive game, but it's really good and I want to keep playing it. And another thing, you might have even understated it a bit too much. It was hard to be a Mana fan in the 2000s and 2010s, because you start out with those first four Mana games. Final Fantasy Adventure through Legend of Mana are all very good in their own right. Which one's your favorite probably depends on like the order you played them in and what age you were and everything. I really adore SD3 slash Trials of Mana, but Secret of Mana is probably more popular overall. It's that's a different discussion. But when the run of new games they tried in the mid 2000s were almost all bad, and the remakes like Adventure of Mana for the Vita and those pretty disappointing that pretty disappointing Secret of Mana remake from some years ago, those were all pretty rough. But the Trials of Mana remake in 2020 was really good, and this just really felt like it felt like I was coming home. It's 5 main characters. I think it's each of them has 9 jobs, and each job plays completely differently. in terms of your skill loadout, and they each have each character has 3 weapon types that they swap between. The 9 jobs are each attached to one of the 8 mana spirits, or one when you're unequipped. So by shuffling around the mana spirits, you have mana spirit super moves and job combos and a lot of boosting and debuffs. And I could probably write a guide on the best job choices for every character, even if it is kind of too easy to just give Morley Nightblade and dice everything up. You can just kind of press a win now button with him with the second job you get in the game. Visions of Mana felt really good. I almost worried it leaned too hard on the mana nostalgia because so many of the bosses are from previous games, but I had an absolute blast playing it. It's like between 30 and 40 hours. A lot of fun explorable spaces. The story, like, you can tell your Final Fantasy X Tales of Symphonia jokes at the beginning if you want, but it at least goes a couple places that are interesting and not completely frustrating. There's a lot of games that had good stories and puzzling endings this year. But yeah, again, and I don't even think it cost a full 70 bones. Wasn't it like a $50 game?
It was definitely lower price. It wasn't 70, but I don't remember where it landed.
Yeah, I think I want to say it was 50 and not 70, but don't hold me to that. But it really is this in a non-derogatory way, this is a mid-budget game that absolutely hit the spot for me. And I know the studio behind it has since been shut down, but Square Enix absorbed some of the staff from that Oka Studios is what it was called. Absorbed some Oka Studio staff into them. So maybe there's hope that Mana will continue in this vein, but I honestly hope it does because I had a really, really good time with Visions of Mana. Because this year is so good, I don't think it's in my top 5 games of the year, but it's definitely in the top 10 and good enough that I want to revisit it for the post-game storyline that I haven't really gone into yet.
And I will say, because you're talking about all the different job classes everyone has, it reminds me to leave a note for players like me. Each of those job classes has a unique look, unique costume. All the weapons look unique. You've got all kinds of weird configurations of weaponry, and how you use them with each class is different. If you're the kind of person who likes visual progression in your RPGs, oh my god, is this a treat for people like me?
SD3 had a pretty good sense of visual progression, even in the Super Famicom version,
Absolutely.
where the characters changed portraits and changed color palettes on their sprite for every job change. This is, and it's also represented in the Trials of Mana remake from 4 years ago. But this is that ratcheted up because each character has 9 forms with weapons visible on screen, and each weapon having a distinctly different play style. You like our main guy, whether it's a short sword, broadsword, or lance, plays completely differently. And I would keep him on lance just because I liked controlling Morley more than any other character, and I would just have the main hero tank for me. But whatever. It's a very, very good RPG, and I want more games like it, and I hope the series continues. But I'm a little hesitant and worried about that because of Oka Studios shutting down.
I haven't played it, but I think that the character of Val has hair that is worthy of a Mana protagonist.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
also, the crop top armor is a choice that is working for him.
It's a good character design, right?
No,
I'm not being sarcastic at all. Like this kind of like with is it an open skirt and there's like a crop top, and it's a tremendous ensemble.
Yeah. So Visions of Mana was one of my most anticipated games of the year at the beginning of the year when we didn't even have a release date, I don't think, and just missed it with everything else. So I played the demo and kind of taunted myself, and then was like, okay, but I still can't play this right now. So it's on my shelf to hopefully get to soon. But yeah, I was very impressed with the demo. It made me feel really bad that I was busy playing Zelda at the time.
Yeah, in your defense, I think Mana and Zelda came out about 2 weeks apart.
Yeah, it was real quick in there. Yeah.
You're in for a treat when you get to it.
It's not going anywhere, but I really hope they continue it. Only because the Trials remake in this have so much promise. and I think Square Enix is at least willing to revitalize their older series a little bit. But speaking of revitalizing older series and series that I think don't have the budget of a Final Fantasy Rebirth, but really punch above their weight with what they have. I want to talk about the game on this list that I played the most recently. I'm not even finished with it yet, but I'm still excited to talk about it. East 10 Nordics came out, I think, right at the beginning of November, and I had to delay it a little bit because I was in the middle of playing Metaphor Fantasio, then Dragon Age Felguard, then Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D. So it came out at an inconvenient time for me. And maybe it was earlier in October, because I'm pretty sure I was playing Metaphor when it came out. But I finally got around to it earlier this month, and I'm about 20 hours in. It weirdly, it's scaled back compared to East 8 or 9, because those games had sort of big spaces to explore and 3 character parties, similar to a mana game, honestly, and sort of a lot of land traversal. While East 10 Nordics, it has only a 2 character party, and you rapidly switch between Adol and Karja, the 2 protagonists. But all of the action is so fast and active, and they use every damn button on the screen, so you can get it is maybe the fastest feeling combat of any action RPG I've played this year, just because there are so many dashes and grapples and everything that you can do in this game. And it starts out a little bit chunky, like you're sort of hurtling from place to place and having things explain to you what's going on in the story. But once you hit your stride a little bit, you team up with some local pirates that are villainized by some townsfolk, but have been secretly defending the whole region from an army of undead for centuries. So you're sailing around on your ship, you're liberating towns and saving captives and taking on undead pirates and searching dungeons for treasure. While Adol is his like usual adventure obsessed self. There's a lot of fun characters in here. Karja is a total delight because Adol is still a silent protagonist. They gave him basically this very sassy scene partner to handle most of the active dialogue, and like roll her eyes at him whenever he says something airheaded the way Adol is maybe prone to. But by the end of the game, you're sort of just sailing around, getting attached to your pirate crew, and sort of uncovering the lore of a new corner of the East world, because like East is basically set in a fake version of the real world, and this is roughly the North Sea and Denmark, hence East 10 Nordics. But I'm really excited to get to back to this one. I want to finish it before I have to do some traveling around for the winter holidays. But so far it's great, and I think it occupies a similar space to Visions of Mana, because this is clearly a mid-budget game, but is really compelling start to finish. It has just a really great moment-to-moment action and a good gameplay loop. Before recording, Josh, you told me that you were also partway through East 10. Are you enjoying it in maybe a similar way that I am?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, this is my like current game, right, that I've been playing the most actively lately. I mean, I love the whole series, right? I kind of went into it having no doubt that I would at least enjoy it, right? East has never let me down, and it still hasn't let me down, right? Like you mentioned, it does feel a little bit scaled back. The thing that I noticed pretty quickly is that East 9 put a big emphasis on like traversal, and like you can climb up every wall, you can jump off every building and glide around, and there's a lot more invisible walls in East 10. Like there's lots of cliffs, you can't even jump off the cliff, right? You got to walk back around around the cliff. But what they've replaced it with is like your skateboard or whatever it is. There's a skateboard, and you've still kind of got a grappling hook. It feels like a little bit, it's scaled back, a little bit more like tightly designed. I feel like they probably felt like they didn't have enough control over how the dungeon designs worked when you could just climb up every single wall, right? Um, and But overall, yeah, the whole game just feels great to play. I keep kind of describing it as like a comfort food RPG for me. Like, it's just really chill to play. I like all the characters, uh, and you don't get the just sail around in a boat on the overworld thing very much anymore. At least not in the games I play, right? Like, I grew up with like Lufia 2, where you had a boat that turned into a submarine and an airship, and you just went everywhere. And I don't have an airship yet. I'm assuming I don't get one, but but just having the pirate ship where you sail around to a bunch of islands on a big scaled down overworld, it just feels like a classic RPG, and I'm loving it.
There's something about that the when I was a kid I walked to school both ways without shoes. When I was a kid we had boats that turned into submarines and then into an airship.
Final Fantasy V eventually goes to that exact place.
It really does.
So my big question for this one is, given that I feel like with Ys 8, there was a big transition from like very bite-sized experience to much more meaty, like epic level RPGs. Even though they maintain that same kind of like mid-budget aesthetic and play style, and they just married that with really strong action gameplay. Where does this fall on that spectrum as far as, really big, epic, overarching RPG? How does it compare to the last couple of Ys games we've seen?
I really feel like if you start from East Origin in the late 2000s, with 7, then Celceta, then 8, then 9, they kept escalating and escalating. More and more story, more map-related stuff, more characters, more lore, more. And this is the only one in that chain combo that scales back a little bit. Like even the dungeons in this game feel a little bit simpler and more direct than East 8 or 9, but the combat really feels like faster and crazier. And like you can sort of Karja and Adal have sort of like a solo mode or a duo mode, and you can rapidly switch between them, and you gain your SP back by attacking. So the way I'll play the game is like solo Adal, spend all my SP, switch to Karja, spend all her SP, go to duo mode, attack the guarding enemy to break their armor, then use a duo combo after my revenge meter gets full. Then then if they're telegraphing an attack that is blue instead of red, I go back to solo mode and dodge around them. It's like the action is faster and crazier than ever, but the way that 9 or East 8 and 9 escalated, this does not escalate in a similar way, but it does go into world lore a little bit. Again, I haven't uncovered everything yet. I'm probably only around halfway done, but it is handling the like Adal's story and East lore in a serious way. And also, it's maybe worth mentioning. I mean, every East game is, except for Origin, is a travelogue of Adal Kristen, and he's always a specific age and in a specific place in the world when the games take place. This is a younger Adal. This takes place in between East 2 and 3, or 2, I think, between
Wow.
just after East 2. So this is still a teenage Adal, and Dogi doesn't even have facial hair yet, but he is a crew member on your ship. So I think that this is specifically a younger, more headstrong Adal, and action that's very fast and exploration that's very present, but maybe not as dense with stuff and writing the way 8 and 9 were. But that's only my feeling, and I thought that if anything, 9 was a little overstuffed with that kind of things, even though the story for East 9 did get quite good by the end.
Yeah, something that I like about the scaling back actually, and like I'm pretty partial to the solo Adal games, right? Like Felgana was my first one. It felt weird when they gave Adal a party to play with, but as much as I like 8 and 9 a lot, I never really became proficient with every one of the party members they gave you, right? It's like I think you have 6 in both games. And here where you just have 2 characters and you kind of rapidly learn to switch between them and kind of combo things, it just feels cleaner to play. You don't feel like you have to be thinking so much about leveling up skills with other characters who maybe you don't want to play as for a long period of time or something like that. And I generally didn't, right? I just kind of like playing as Adal. And here, playing as Karja doesn't feel like a penalty.
There is a lot of skill leveling and like finding recipes and upgrading your ship and even like finding a whenever you find a potion in the world, that's really exciting because that gives you another empty bottle to brew your own potions in. It's so there's a lot of systems at play, and I'd never totally understood the like forging gems to put in your skill tree thing. That gets a little weird.
Yeah, I kind of just plop whatever I have in there.
No, but it really is in between a solo adult game and a full party game. Maybe obviously because there's 2 playable characters instead of 6 or 7. But I mean, it feels great to play. My one caveat is I wish that the ship moved a little faster. Because sometimes you're just sailing and you're like, oh, maybe I should throw on a podcast or something, because I'm gonna be pointing my ship at that marker for another 6 minutes.
Well, come back in 10 years and you'll get the Swift Sail version.
But I also recently played a game where where getting a ship is a major plot point for the action here. And in fact, I just spent 2 podcast episodes talking about it with 2 of you. Wes and Zach, you were on some Dragon Quest 3 episodes with me earlier this month. So, I mean, maybe we don't need to go into quite as much detail as we did in those episodes. But Zach,
I think we should do the exact level of detail.
All right. Okay, so let's
We
set
got a lot
aside
of time tonight. Let's go.
let's set aside 2.5 hours just for Dragon Quest 3 talk.
That seems appropriate.
You got 11 minutes.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start. Obviously, I've expended a lot of words on Dragon Quest 3 at this point, but like I think that when it boils down to it, like Dragon Quest 3 is one of the best RPGs ever made, and they have reproduced Dragon Quest 3 in a way that feels like one of the best RPGs ever made, while also feeling like a modern game. And not in all ways, of course. Like it doesn't, like there are things about it that are not modern, but like it's purposeful. Like the game design wouldn't totally work if it was entirely modern. And I think that the new job classes are fun to experiment with, as in like the one job class that is broken. But it's Dragon Quest 3, and they add in some additional story stuff that is really cool. The story stuff was already good in Dragon Quest 3. The level of exploration is good, like sort of like the linearity and then the openness, and then the linearity feels really good still, in a way that I think is not reproduced often in modern games. And so I think that Dragon Quest 3 is just like the most pure Dragon Quest experience. And I think that the adjustments and changes they've made don't lose any of that purity. And it's still very accessible to someone to play it today. And I think it's just an excellent RPG.
I mean, every version of Dragon Quest 3 is good. It's been a good game since 1988. But now they gave us an absolutely stunningly beautiful, awesome way to play the game that moves this classic into the modern era, that now I think it might be kind of hard to go back to the NES or Game Boy Color version. But I say that only with affection, because I had so much fun playing Dragon Quest 3 again that I kind of want to go back and do the post-game dungeon right the hell now.
This speaks such good volumes for the next couple of remakes coming out of the 1 and 2 collection, because it really is. It's just the fact that this game feels better to play moment to moment. And if you can achieve that with an NES game where you just kill some of that downtime without sacrificing the spirit of it, you've done something truly incredible.
There's one downside to this, though. The Live Alive remake from a few years ago was so good, and this was so good, that now we have to endure a never-ending chorus of, oh, they got to make this game HD 2D. They got to make that game HD 2D. And I mean, please.
I know how Wes feels about that.
Sollosi, you can't get me on an HD 2D rant right now.
I mean,
we don't have time for this.
I know. But I mean, I'm just going to speak to all the Retro Encounter listeners right now. Please give that line of thinking a rest and enjoy what we have, like this awesome new remaster of Dragon Quest 3, and maybe look forward to the HD 2D version of 1 and 2 that we're getting kind of soon, ?
Apparently this year or next year, or yeah.
It's on our list.
I think I said this in the episode last week, but I never thought I would want to replay Dragon Quest 2, because that game is a bit of a slog at the end, and I struggled when I played it 20 years ago or so, maybe 25 years ago. But now I could not be more excited to replay Dragon Quest 2 because of this new through line, these new versions of the games. But we have talked about Dragon Quest 3 a lot this month. I'm sorry, Zach, I'm not going to give you your 2 hours in this episode alone for it. But there is another episode from earlier this year where in which we discussed the Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom in a spoiler cast, and somehow Josh, you weren't on that episode. Still not sure how that happened, but I know 100% for certain that you played this game and loved the hell out of it. So you want to talk about it for a bit?
Yeah, so this was a big surprise, right? There were definitely like rumors floating around that Nintendo was working on a new top-down Zelda game, but we haven't seen any any brand new top-down Zelda game since 2015 if you're talking Triforce Heroes, and even longer if you're not. Uh, and then we got the Link's Awakening remake, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're just going to remake stuff," and that would have been great, right? I'd be totally cool with more remakes. But then they just kind of dropped this brand new game, and then they said, "Oh, Zelda's playable, not Link," and it just works totally differently, right? It's a little bit of let's inject that Breath of the Wild kind of thinking into top-down Zelda to some extent, right? Um, and yeah, I it works great. Like it's a really solid game. I actually still need to go back and like finish my 100% run to just finish up everything. I'm pretty sure there's still some like big side quests I haven't done. Uh, but it's that's just again, there's just so many games, right? You're just right now just going from one thing to another really quickly, and but when I had that few weeks where I was just really focused on it, just learning how to use the little echoes, which just for clarity for anybody who hadn't played it, is you can just copy objects in the world, whether it's an enemy or a box or an old bed or a cloud, right? Like you can just take objects and duplicate them and stack them on top of each other and see how they interact with each other, in order to traverse the world and to defeat enemies. Because for the most part, you don't have a sword, right? There is a sword with a time limit, but it just plays very differently from any other Zelda game. Uh, I have seen it doesn't vibe with everyone. It's sort of the difference between playing like a warrior type class in an RPG or a caster class in an RPG. And since you're playing Zelda and you're more like a summoner, right? Than you are than you are a warrior, and that doesn't work for everybody. Um, and so I don't think it's like among the best Zelda games ever made, but it is just a really fun, really unexpected, uh, just adventure, right? For the end of the year. Uh, and it's not like a gigantic game either. It's a game I like. Y'all may kind of already know that I tend to replay a lot of Zelda games every year, but some of them are a lot harder to replay every year. This one feels like a bite-sized game that once you know it, you can finish it in 10 hours or less probably, without even really speed running, and just have a good time. And so I'm really looking forward to coming back a year from now and trying it again, and maybe using some different echoes and solving the puzzles in different ways, and just seeing how much I can experiment with it. Because just like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they just gave us a world and gave us some tools and just said, kind of go have fun with these and see what you can figure out.
This is so unusual because I've heard a lot of scuttlebutt about it. At some point or another, this was a some kind of a Zelda Maker game, or they were intending to make a game with at least that as a side feature. But instead of going in that route, they made a game where you could basically summon elements that would be placeable objects in a Zelda Maker, but instead use Zelda's Trirod for it. And you really do play like a summoner or like a Minecraft character in this game, because to get around, you're stacking beds and trampolines on top of each other, and there are so many ways to defeat enemies or solve puzzles or encounters, that this has a level of creative expression that really isn't present in any other 2D Zelda. Because in I mean 2D Zelda, like every dungeon will have one and precisely one way to solve any given puzzle, but this is so open ended and free structured, but while still giving you breadcrumbs, like in the dungeon where you need to use electricity to light lamps, they'll give you electric enemies nearby to defeat and then copy into your rod. And there's sort of a like a midi quest around every dungeon that you have to solve to enter the dungeon, but the monsters encountered in that quest will be very useful in that dungeon. Like they give you hints and nudge you into solving puzzles in a certain way, but there are a zillion ways to solve every puzzle, and that's a level of freedom that's only really in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom in a Zelda game. But they
Right.
translated that to a 2D space, and even though this game is not super long, it's maybe 8 dungeons, maybe less, with not a lot of space or fluff in between each dungeon. But it's very dense. There's something like 4 or 5 towns, side quests in each one of them, a bunch of hidden things all around the world map. There's, even though it's not the biggest play space, there's a surprising amount of things to do. There's even a potion brewing system that's kind of like the cook that's kind of like cooking in Breath of the Wild, but instead it's a chain of smoothies, and they end. I mean, oh boy, the I think it's like the total number of drinks you can mix is over 100. There's a, even though this is not a big play space and it's definitely not the longest or broadest Zelda game, there's a lot to do here, and they give you a remarkable amount of freedom, even though I used most of that freedom to just stack water blocks on top of each
Yeah,
other
right.
and swim to higher elevations.
And that's the thing. Oh, I was gonna say, like, that's the thing about the tools, right? Is you, and Breath of the Wild's this way too, right? You can solve this stuff in the simplest way possible if you want to, and just stack beds on top of each other for like the whole game. Or you can figure out how every object interacts with others, and just come up with these wacky ways to do it just for the fun of it, right? And so it is more of a it's more like a sandbox experience, and that's what I'm most excited to revisit, is to maybe not use the beds quite so much when I play it again.
I mean, even just with water blocks, you can electrify them with electric keys, or freeze them with a variety of ice monsters and push the ice blocks around. It's like there's a surprising amount of interactivity and freedom and other things, and I definitely did not explore most of the game's optional content, but I would give this one another shot down the line, because it tickles that nostalgia button I always have for 2D Zelda. I'm trying it out and I don't hate it.
What did I do? Why did I do this?
I haven't even heard that
Your
episode
fault.
yet.
Your fault. Your fault.
I haven't even heard that episode yet. I've just heard you guys joking about it, but I don't hate it.
What have I done? Okay, sorry, Sollosi.
But if Josh and I are the only 2 people that have played Echoes of Wisdom, is there anyone else here that has?
I would really like to, but Amanda is closing in on 200 hours of Tears of the Kingdom, so I haven't had access to my Switch for quite some time. But once I do, I'm going to be playing the crap out of this.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but it's the most excited I've been to play a Zelda game when I cross some more things off the list in a long time. Zelda's not necessarily my series, but man, is the idea behind this one so cool, and hearing everyone love on it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a go.
I have not played it, but I watched my wife stack a lot of beds.
But I mean, I mentioned that this was a game I did not explore every single facet of. The next 3 games on our list are, I think, the 3 games I spent the most time in this year. It's a giant 4-way pile up between these 3 and FF7 Rebirth. So, Jono, I think we got to talk about it. Let's visit 2023 Honolulu.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think visiting Honolulu in 2023 is always a good idea. So yeah, we are talking about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, which is the direct sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon, the first actual turn-based JRPG Yakuza / Like a Dragon game. So this game was just about the best possible way to start off my year. It was the first game I finished this year, and I adored it on almost every level. It was a delight from beginning to end. I had concerns going into it, primarily involving. So it's a direct sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon. So Ichiban is the main character, but then they announced that Kiryu was also going to be a main character. They were going to share the spotlight, and I was against that at the time. I was like, no, 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 he's done. We've told his story. We've created this incredible cast of characters. Can't we please just focus on Ichiban and his friends, and maybe we could have cameos.
You and I were
But
on podcasts together where you suggested that the Kiryu parts of the game would be brawlers, while the Ichiban parts of the game would be turn-based RPGs. And you were kind of right and wrong.
I still maintain that would have been, uh, I don't want to say better, because I mean, you eventually split with no spoilers as to why, but eventually you split into two different parties with both of your protagonists in charge of each party. And each party has different skills and abilities and inherent job classes, although you can switch between tons of different job classes. Look, this is just ignoring the fact that I think I love Like a Dragon, I love Yakuza. This is just an incredible JRPG in the classic mold. It has astonishingly good turn based combat. It has a very in depth combat system, to massive, massive maps to explore. It has great characters, amazing sub stories, as the Yakuza series always does. Uh, so many weapons, so many mini games. Oh my god, there are so many mini games in this game, and most of them are extremely good. It's just a real good Like a Dragon game, and I think in many ways I don't want to say the word perfect sequel, but a damn near perfect sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon, especially in the way they've changed the combat system. In Yakuza Like a Dragon, it was turn-based combat with elements of the Yakuza series. So, like if you were standing next to a bicycle, for example, you could pick up the bicycle and beat a guy to death with it. But your characters were stationary. They'd like move a little bit from side to side, but wherever they were when your turn started, that's where they were. Here, you have a little bit more room to literally maneuver. There is a circle around your character, and you can move your character and position them uh, around enemies and your allies to create combos where you can knock an enemy into one of your allies and they'll knock them back. You can use environmental attacks. So if like you can position them next to like a wall, for example, you might be able to do a heat action. And again, if there's a bicycle that's just out of reach, you can move your character near the bicycle now, pick up the bicycle, and use it as a weapon. So it really is a wonderful culmination of both the traditional action RPG combat of the Yakuza series and the turn based RPG combat of Yakuza Like a Dragon. It does it beautifully.
Yeah, I won't give away our game of the year picks, but I will say that for me, for best combat, this one.
Me too.
That's saying something, because like this year is stacked with like great combat systems, like Metaphor, which we might talk about later, has great combat. So does Rebirth, but I just absolutely loved the combat system in this game. Just like the ability to like the way that it felt so like at real time and turn based all the time, was just fabulous. Like it was so good. And I was actually supposed to be on the spoiler cast for this game back all the way back, towards the beginning of the year, and I wasn't, because like I hated the ending of this game so much that I didn't want to be the downer on the spoiler cast. But I will say this, in terms of the game of the year, like the first 2/3 of this game for me would probably be my game of the year. Honolulu is a phenomenal open space. There's so much to do. There's so much to see. There's so many things to talk to. The storyline for the first 2/3 of this game, even as it splits, is excellent. And even as someone who at the time had only played a few Yakuza games prior to this, like it was still really good. And I really loved the open world elements of it. And I really loved the combat. And Ichiban Kasuga and Kiryu are both amazing protagonists in this game. So like I have massive criticisms of this game, but the first 2/3 of this are just like so good that like I I can't overlook my criticisms of the last third, but like it's so good that I understand everybody who loves it.
I think that this game iterates on all of the ideas in 7 Like a Dragon so beautifully that it's astounding. Like in 7, I think only Ichiban could do those heat action moves and pick up objects from the ground. but now every character can. You have interactions like tag team moves if your relationship with that character is high enough, and like if you pick up a like a fire extinguisher from the ground and attack with it, then your attack becomes water element. Just and there's way more like status and boosts and debuffs interactions with the different classes in the game. The job system is completely bananas in this game. It's one of
Mhm.
it's a very, very fun job system, and they finally give more jobs to the women. Your female characters have more than 5 jobs in this one. And the story and writing, I think, are remarkably strong until you get to that end game, because you have 10 playable characters, including Kiryu and Ichiban. Almost the entire cast from the previous game returns, plus you get a handful of new ones. And the dedicated side quests and character quests are some of my favorite ever. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, but the Let It Snow side quest
Oh my
is
god,
is
it's so
maybe
good.
it's
It's so
it's
good.
it's maybe the best side quest I've in any game I've ever played, and I laughed and cried during it.
The tonal clash at the climax of that, it is so abrupt that you just it just takes you by surprise, and you can't help but just start
It's
laughing
actually
through your
it's
tears.
it's literally breathtaking. Like
Yeah.
that. It's like a dragon to the core.
And Zhao, who's one of my favorite characters from the first game, he's a Chinese triad gang boss who retired to be a chef. His side quest is about basically a disgruntled Yelp reviewer that he tracks down to to get an honest opinion out of him, and then he ends up defending that Yelp reviewer from a bunch of gangsters trying to defend Zhao's honor. It's hilarious, and it's the character writing is it's so silly but also so earnest that I really got attached to the main cast in this game so deeply that made the confusing choices made for the end game even more confusing. But and also, I mean, we've only glossed around it a little bit when the around the midpoint of the game where you sort of separate into the Ichiban team and the Kiryu team. The Kiryu team has a dedicated set of side quests where Kiryu revisits people from the previous from the first 7 Yakuza games 0 through 6, like and you basically like he has to acknowledge with his past and reconnect with previous characters while he's still doing the suffering in silence thing, and his arc is less like Ichiban's uh endless kindness and more Kiryu like learning how to rely on others.
Yeah.
You'll even like look at a poster of a samurai movie or something, goes, huh, that reminds me of the time I had a dream where I was a samurai twice. Like it's a celebration of every Kiryu game, plus being an incredibly strong Ichiban game, up and also somehow has like a full Animal Crossing mini game that my girlfriend played for 20 hours.
You're forgetting about the full Pokemon game they shoved in there too.
Oh yeah, no, with the with
Sujimon.
Lord, yes.
Sujimon, where you have to take down the discrete 4.
Mhm.
I
That
cannot
I
keep all of
the
the mini games in this game
demure
in my
4.
head.
Get it right.
yeah, and yeah, and I mean, and holy mackerel, they even brought back Crazy Taxi with this crazy food delivery game where and also like this is the game where I discovered that the Japanese name for Sega Bass Fishing 2001 is Getobas, which is just awesome. Yeah, there's a whole like Virtua Fighter 2 and 5 and Getobas are all in this game too. It is an incredible theme park full of great writing and great gameplay and my favorite turn-based combat in ages, but the ending is so weird that it's only a contender for my favorite game of the year and not my number one game with a bullet.
If I recall correctly in our spoiler cast, that we came up with the one joke, which I would love to see come true in future games, which is Yakuza characters don't die, they just open bars.
That's right. Two characters believed to have died in Yakuza 3. One of them opens a bar in 7 Like a Dragon, and one of them opened a bar in this game.
I'm just waiting for Mine to show up at the head of a bar in the next game. It would be amazing.
The last thing I will say is, like, as a person who's only played at this point, I've played 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2, and then I've played like half of 3, and I was like, I don't know, I need some of my quality of life from Kiwami 2.
Three could use a remake. Look,
It sure could. Anyway, my point is, like, with all those Curio stories, because I haven't played most of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, like, they're still really, really powerful. Like all that side content with Curio and him sort of like scrolling back through his life. Even as a person with the time and only played Kiwami and Zero, is still really powerful. Like it's still like a really, really good game that should have ended about 15 hours earlier.
Okay, this is not me defending the ending. I think my biggest problem with the ending of Infinite Wealth is not necessarily the ending. I think it's the order of the ending. I feel like after Ichiban's they resolve this big problem on this island. No spoilers, but there's an island and there's a problem, and Ichiban and his party fix it. And then everything after that just feels like a weird afterthought, and it really creates a sense of anticlimax in the game, ignoring all the other problems with it. But
Yeah.
I feel like ending the game with Kiryu created this incredible anticlimax to the game that just made you feel like, why am I doing this now? I feel like I've already beaten it.
And they try to give you two end game scenarios, and with sort of two final dungeons and final bosses, but the end result is like both of them sort of feel weak.
Yeah.
And we even argue that maybe the two characters should have swapped locations or swapped bosses, which I'm not sure I 100%
That's
support.
an interesting idea.
Yeah, right. No,
Yeah.
because I mean, maybe Kiryu should be fighting the person exploiting children, and maybe Ichiban should be fighting the person with a with a history with Masato from the first game.
Yeah.
But it's really it's sort of confusing how they set it up, but the journey to get there was so good
Yeah.
that it really is a special video game. And if you think you'll never play it, then at least go on YouTube or something and look up that Let It Snow quest, because
So
oh
good.
boy,
It's excellent.
It's so weird and strange because it starts out as like a sub story that you're just like, all right, this is just another kind of touching sub story. Then it takes a hard left turn, and then you're back to the touching sub story, and then it takes another hard left turn, and a return of a character who you never thought you'd see again. It's just so good.
It circles right back to being genuinely touching again. Like,
Yeah.
it is a bizarrely affecting story.
I am very excited for Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii next year.
Oh my
I'm excited
God,
to
you
go
have no
back to
idea.
Honolulu. Yeah, I'm excited to go back to Honolulu, but also I just kind of
Majima.
yeah, it's Majima. I'm pretty excited for this. I think it's gonna be
Aloha Majima. They got freaking
Exactly.
Samoa Joe from like AEW to play an islander pirate in that game. Holy, what's going on?
I'm also very happy that they gave us a full year break between Yakuza games because I was getting real friggin' exhausted. They released 3 Yakuza games in a 12-month period. That's nuts.
How much of this game did you play, Wes? I'm curious.
I'm well over the halfway point.
Okay.
I need to circle back to it. I didn't play many games this year.
Yeah, I got you.
And I knew I was going to circle back again later because, I mean, Like a Dragon is one of my favorite games. Definitely, like, it pretty quickly took the top spot in the Yakuza series for me because Ichiban is much more my speed of character. So
Yeah.
spending more time with him and the people in his life, and just, man, this game plays better than its predecessor. And I thought its
Yeah.
predecessor played amazingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the story didn't hit me quite as hard. I felt like the first one was a little bit more tightly told. But you kind of get that nice trade-off but it feels so good to play, and the side content is so fun and so much more interesting because now you can start getting some of those callbacks, and it's not a callback to, a game I played 10, 15 years ago. It's a callback to a game I played a couple of years ago.
I think I'm going to talk about this on a Rhythm Encounter episode that I'm signed up for. But one of my favorite, or two of my favorite moments in any games this year were one fight in Kiryu's chapter where he sort of has to rely on his teammates, and then in a later fight he relies on a different set of characters with a musical callback to the first fight. And there's things like that in this game that are so emotionally charged that I forgave so much of the weaknesses of this end game because the journey was so tightly made and so full of emotion. And this is the only game I got a platinum trophy on this year, and I really played the bejesus out of it. I I grinded up to level 70 and got, I think, every single end game weapon except for every single rank 7-star weapon except for 2. But oh man, this only makes me more excited for Pirate Majima and whatever we get out of Ryuga Gotoku Studio in
I'm
the
gonna
future.
play that game so hard.
Am I gonna
And
play a Virtua Fighter game for the first time in 20 years? Like buy a new Virtua Fighter game and not just play it
I
in a
think
Yakuza
the
game?
answer is obviously yes. Of course you are. And the listeners know that you'll have more time to do that.
I mean, I love fighting games, but I don't think I've bought a new Virtua Fighter game since Virtua Fighter 4 for the PS2. Oh boy.
Well, hasn't there
And don't
only
forget,
been one brand new Virtual Fighter game since then? They just keep
Virtua
adding to
Fighter,
it.
yeah, Virtua Fighter 5 came out in like 06 or 07 for the 360 and PS3, and they've come out with new versions of it, including an update from just a couple years ago with rollback netcode. But yeah, there hasn't been a new Virtua Fighter game in almost 20 years. But Ryuga Gotoku Studio is doing a new one, and now I have to wonder if there's going to be a Street Fighter 6 World Tour RPG mode in it. But okay, if I'm talking about my past with Virtua Fighter, we really need to move on. Wes, this wasn't the only game other than Dragon Quest with Dragon in the title that I played during the Year of the Dragon. That also has remarkable gameplay refinements to its combat.
Yeah, this is a real dragon heavy year, I found. As I've tried to explain to my girlfriend which game I'm playing right now, and is that Dragon Quest? No, that's Dragon Age. No, that's Like a Dragon. No, it is a nonstop parade. But Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Oh my God, is this exactly what I wanted in a Dragon Age sequel? And let's completely ignore discourse around it and focus on why it kind of rocks.
But IGN,
the discourse around it is maddening.
It's
but we're
baffling.
gonna ignore that and just talk about what we like or dislike about this from our hearts, Wes.
And I frickin' adore this game. This is quickly climbing the rankings of my Dragon Age games. I don't know that anything will ever reach Dragon Age Origins for me again, because that's such a moment in time. If you recreated Dragon Age Origins today, it wouldn't feel the same way that it felt back when it came out. But I think this is such a good idea to try to reinvent the Dragon Age franchise while not throwing away the past entirely. Whether it's putting you in control of someone like Rook, who feels you give them a sense of history when you create them, but they still feel a little bit like, um, much like a lot of more modern BioWare games, they feel like they have a little bit of personality to them. And yes, you're informing that. This is a lot stronger on the, the different kinds of choices you make affect the incidental dialogue from your Rook, which I think both helps form this idea of who your Rook is, and is so invisible that some people think that you don't have as much control over it as you do. Um, the story is, like, lore wise, pristine, like paying off things that were first teased back in the original game, and doing so in a sensible way that makes it clear that this has been planned out. And even if this isn't the same team, entirely, that brought you the previous games, it still very much feels like there was a plan and they're following it, and it all feels right, which is great. It dips into a lot of uncharted territory, whether it's new locations, new types of characters, things you've only read about, and codexes become front and center in this game. And there's a little bit of reinvention there too, as this becomes almost like a soft reboot, where the plot clearly directly continues from Inquisition, and the lore that is dropped are things that have been hinted at for years and years and years. But this still feels like it's approachable to a fresh player, and I chalk that up to a few things. Some of it is a primarily new cast. While old people show up, they don't show up as like the focus of the story. You are primarily dealing with net new characters who are stellar, amazingly written, very well rounded, representing both types of characters within the world and just types of humans we haven't dealt with before. Making it a really endearing cast. And I mean, I've gone this long without mentioning the gameplay, which is complete reinvention, and I think an absolute delight to play. Um, it's not as responsive or swift as like a full-on character action game, but it's not really trying to be. It's trying to be more responsive action than the series has seen before, while allowing you the time and execution um, to still think tactically and still think about what you're doing. For example, I'm playing the Spellblade archetype, which is a new type of mage who wields a dagger and an arcane orb, and kind of weave in, in mid to close range, throwing magic out of the arcane orb to build up, explosion procs on enemies, and then dashing in with your knife to trigger them. And you're constantly weaving back and forth, and then you start layering on your abilities, which might add status effects, and those status effects can be detonated or they can be enhanced. And there are so many decisions you make in setting up your party before you step foot onto the battlefield, that the things you're doing are really complex, but it still feels like a relatively easy to play action game. You can be a fan of slower paced RPGs and still really excel and do cool things in this game, and that's a rare treat. And it really feels like they're
Man,
going in a
you are
new
really
direction.
selling this game. Damn, I
Oh,
need to play it.
It's
I
Woo!
adore it.
I was stunned by the beauty of it so many times.
Oh yeah.
Like I would just pause in the haunted mansion where you do some quests for Emmerich, or the elven forest where you spend a significant part of the game in it. The environments are so beautiful, the animations are so tight that I can sort of tell that this game has been off and on and off in development for 10 years, because there's a tremendous amount of effort that went into this game. I said I wasn't going to interact with the discourse. I'm going to a little bit, Wes, and I'm sorry, but
We kind of got to. It's hard
yeah,
not to, right?
people were upset that there's sort of only one path in this game, and it's to be good, and that's basically true. I mean, they are encouraging you to support your team members and become closer with them, rather than have the option to betray them, or the option to have a fierce disagreement with them. But these 7 companion characters are so good that I kind of didn't care. I wanted to become friends with them, and they each represent each character represents either one particular city or region in the world, or one particular perspective that's very different from each other. That, like, one way of exploring the world is just getting closer to your team and having them and talking about their lives. And if it wasn't for Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, this would be my favorite cast of characters in an RPG this year, with apologies to Rebirth and Metaphor and all of the really excellent RPGs this year. It does some things that older Dragon Age games did that I almost didn't expect. There's 2 big fights in the game. One is one of the final fights, and one of them is sort of an optional mid-game fight that I was able to dialogue my way out of, because of decisions I made earlier, and because of the origin of my Rook main character. Like I was able to use the character I had built and actions I had done in other quests to avoid major boss fights. And that's something that's like normal in a D&D game or in an older Dragon Age game that I frankly thought a BioWare game wouldn't try in 2024. But I mean, the character writing is so good, and sort of the impact, the story choices you make when they're present are so interesting, that I already want to replay this game in a different class. And also, I mean, there's 3 main classes for Rook: Warrior, Rogue, and Mage, but each of them has sort of 3 main archetypes that you can explore around in. And because whenever you find equipment, it just upgrades existing equipment, instead of becoming a never ending like trail of loot to do. Like if you find, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a weapon. If you find an executioner's blade, and then you find a second executioner's blade, then just the rarity of your executioner's blade will increase until you find all of them and you've maxed out your rarity. So like it's very easy to completely change your play style based on what equipment you've found, and what skills you have available to you. I don't want to talk about this game over long. Perhaps I'm too late in doing so. But this game has so much fascinating gameplay options, story choices, and a cast to interact with that I want to replay it right the hell now, and I don't know which one of my characters I want to date the second time around. Actually, that's a lie. I think I want to get with Emmerich this time.
What absolutely threw me off was I had bought into some of the discourse around Tosh, not actively, not attempting to, but there was this part of me that thought, I'm going to meet this person, they're going to be, real immature, and it's going to be, it's going to seem forced. And as a non-binary person, I get very protective about that kind of representation. But holy crap, I met Tosh, and instantly they jumped up to the top of my my list of like, oh, I guess I'm not dating this person anymore because Tosh is freaking great. Um, because it's nuanced, and there's a lot of nuance and subtlety in how these people interact, but you have to be empathetic toward them to really understand exactly how well written it is. Because these characters have these well fleshed out backgrounds, and if you really think about, well, what must it be like being raised up, as someone who's not a member of anything, who's never been able to feel like they belong anywhere, like how would they react to that? How would they protect themselves when they're dealing with that all day, every day, even when they're with the person they're closest with? Um, and every character has elements like that where when they act in a way that doesn't seem, the most ideal way to behave, if you look at their past and you think about it, there is probably some big flashing light somewhere there, that you can follow that trail and see, oh, that's why they reacted so weirdly. And when a game manages to do that with its cast, it is mind blowing to me. It is such a good revelation when all the pieces finally click and you're like, they're thinking about this harder than I am, and that feels fantastic.
Yeah, every one of these characters has a specific struggle that you can help them reach a conclusion to, and they're all very powerfully written. Like they're not as funny as the character quests in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, but they are very very interesting and meaningful. And I wanted to help all of these characters. And again, like a lot of the complaints around the game, they do too much explaining at the beginning, and you repeat yourself too much for what your quest is trying to accomplish. But and I mean, it gets compared unfavorably to Marvel movies
I mean, that's like
many
literally
times.
what almost every JRPG does. Like, it's ridiculous.
They're mad that there's too much positivity and friendship in this game, and sometimes it's what I want. And once I sort of was on board with the kind of game this was, I was so excited to play more of it. And I know I want to replay it, but this time with a different race and class, because I mean I played as a dwarf warrior who used like death damage over time spells that I would detonate to heal myself with, and then throw my shield and have it explode into a poison cloud. Like but I used my dwarven heritage and my Mornwatch background in conversation so much. I'm like, I need to play this game as like an elf or something, because I'll approach so much of the game differently doing that. But yeah, no, it's great. I'm not sure it's my favorite Dragon Age game because I really think there are strengths and weaknesses to Orange's Inquisition and Veilguard. And I've replayed all, or I've played or replayed all four of them, including Dragon Age 2, in the past 12 months. So they're very fresh in my mind. But yeah, I mean, and people are maybe justifiably upset that you import very, very few decision points from previous games. But also, in BioWare's defense, those games are 10 years old, and we don't know what their vision for the series is, or how much could reasonably be carried over. There's so much to love about this game. It's in my top 5 of the year. I already want to replay it. I might have a problem. Hashtag Year of the Dragon.
The discourse about this game is not unique. I feel like I have a lot of theories about bullying on the internet and specifically in regards to video games, but I feel like the people who were attacking this game and attacking the people who liked it, to them, they get the same amount of pleasure out of attacking people as we do from playing the actual game. Like it's almost like for them, their passion in gaming is attacking people who enjoy things that they don't. And that triggers the reward centers in their brain for some reason. That's a big problem that I don't know the solution to. But like when I looked at Veilguard, I looked at the arguments. They were nonsense. They just are. Like they don't have any points. They are just attacking because they attack because they enjoy it. Um, and that's tragic. That's sad. But I think trying to find logic or merit in the discourse about this game outside of people who are genuinely being like, well, this was good, but I didn't quite like this, is pointless. So I don't think that we should engage with it because I don't think it gives us anything. I don't think it helps anything.
A lot of people decided that they did not like this game before ever playing it,
Yeah.
and and some people have justified qualms about the early game dialogue or importing saves from previous games. But if you actually engage with this game and enjoy it at its level, I think it's a really, really excellent action RPG that almost gets to the level of like a Souls game or a God of War 2018 with just the number of buttons and interactions and combat. Uh, and yet, and there's 6 factions to interact with and do quests with, and and I've talked about how good the characters are. There's a whole like uh otherworld setting in the Fade that's full of puzzles and has crazy interactions. I think this has some of the better dungeons in any game this year, with only really exceeded in my opinion by the game I'm going to talk about next. Wes, I hope you're with me on this one. Like I'm not sure they're going to make another one because there is some finality to this story, but I want more games like this because I really had a great time with Veilguard.
I mean, I think there are a lot of good lessons they can take here into the Mass Effect game that they're making next. And I think that, like, I can definitely see the point where this can feel like maybe they're not going to make more Dragon Age games, but dear Lord, do I hope that's wrong. I hope you feel very dumb about that thought in, like, 5 years time, not 10 years time.
Well, it's weird. They've already said there's not going to be any DLC for this game because they're full steam ahead on the next Mass Effect game, and that's fine, I guess. But my theory is if this game does very well, because they revealed in the run up to this game that Inquisition in the intervening 10 years had sold over 10 million copies. Like if this game does really well, there will be more Dragon Age, but it's going to be an even more of a reset. Like they're even going to separate themselves from the previous storylines from 1 through 3 even more is my feeling. That there could be another one. This is a break point. This is a turning point because they really deal with some world shaping stuff.
Absolutely.
But speaking of a world that's really shaped by your actions, or even a world that you sort of discover what happened to it, I don't want to get into it too deep. We just recorded an episode earlier this month about it. Metaphor Fantasio, a game by I think it's called Studio Zero, which is a lot of basically Sega Atlas staff that worked on the Persona games of the 2000s and 2010s. Zach, you and I talked about this at length on a spoiler cast. This is one of the best RPGs Atlas has ever made, in my opinion. It has a lot of inspiration from Persona games with its character-driven social link system and its calendar management, but also a lot of inspiration from Etrian Odyssey with its elaborate mapping and dungeon exploration and its job system, but also goes into political and socioeconomic territory in its narrative that that RPGs, or especially Japanese RPGs, rarely address. And I mean, its ending is almost it almost doesn't live up to the rest of the game, I think. But from the characters to the story to the planning to the action to the gameplay, I think this is one of the best games of the year. It's in my top 5. It'll be very evident my rankings when we publish all of the editor pieces in another week or so. I almost feel like I talked too much about this game on the spoiler cast a while back because we really got into it in that episode. But I mean, am I wrong in thinking that we're going to be talking about this game for decades?
No, I think that it's like a culmination for Atlas. It pulls certainly it's a lot of Persona, right? Like everybody's going to talk about that. But it's a lot of SMT2. It's a lot of Etrian Odyssey as well. And it's just it's such a timely story, along with having some of the best combat of the year. The press turn here, like obviously it's not as challenging as like an SMT game, but it's still press turn works wherever. It's such a good system. And you know, I think that, like, you think about like Louise as an antagonist, and I don't want to get too political here. But you think about Louise as an antagonist, and he's so much represents so much of the anger and rage that we see that dominates American politics and a lot of world politics nowadays. And I think that looking at who he is and our reaction to him and the world's reaction to him is really important. I think that our own reaction to the story actually has a lot to do with current day, and that's not common in JRPGs. I feel like JRPGs, they sometimes go very philosophical, and they sometimes go very like sort of bare bones basic tropey, whereas here I feel like it's actually like important for 2024. And I think that is remarkable because this game has been in development for 10 years, right? And so I think that it's remarkable on that front, first of all, but it's also remarkable on like cleaning up and perfecting so many of the systems that Atlas has been working on for over a decade now.
This is some of the best press turn combat we've
Yeah,
ever seen,
absolutely.
and that's been around at least since SMT3 in like, what was that, 2003? So yeah,
That sounds right. Yeah.
it's a culmination of 20 years of iterations on a battle system, 20 years of, or 15 years since Persona 3 of these of gamifying interactions with NPCs and party members.
Yeah.
And to go with with the political ties of this game, I think it's not an accident that his name is Louise, or it's Louis in Japanese, spelled Lewis, because
Yeah.
he really does resemble Louis the 14th, the Sun King, who was kind of the symbol of the opulence of the French nobility in a few decades before the French Revolution occurred. But also the way he spouts meritocracy and military might while really just being openly a fascist echoes certain movements in politics today and politics throughout history. Even though this is set in a fantasy world, it feels very current. And
That's the whole point of the game, right?
yeah,
So,
and yeah, exactly. And it's Refantasio's in the title because there's a lot of talk in the game about what changes need to be made to this society. What is a utopia? Is a utopia even practical to achieve? Like what can we do with the resources what we have? Characters are attacked for being too idealist, and characters are attacked for being not for being not empathetic or idealist enough. And even though like the main character, you are always, you're fighting for truth, love, and justice, so don't get it wrong, you're not made to be the bad guy for the most part in this game. But it really does play around with politics in its central narrative in a way that never stops being fascinating.
yeah, it's visually stunning. I think it's like, I know Persona is always visually interesting, but I think this is the most visually interesting one. The music is phenomenal. Some of that choral, like almost medieval choral stuff is just, it's perfect for this game, and it's just stunning. Like it's such a well-made game that I hate that I don't like the last couple hours of it. But it's like we think about, like, because I think the reality is, like, we all know, like, when we think about game of the year for RPGs, at least for our audience, we're talking about Rebirth, we're talking about Metaphor is consistently excellent for 65 70 hours, and I think that the ending lets it down, whereas like Rebirth is like up and down, up and down, up and down, and I think it has higher highs and lower lows. But like the consistency and the excellence of it, and the combat, and like the visuals, and like to me, because I hate having to think about like, what are my responses going to be to like advance this social link in a Persona game. I love that risk isn't here.
Yeah,
Like
they smooth it out significantly.
exactly.
For this,
It's like a game that is made for me, and I adored it, and I think that it is worthy of game of the year conversations, and worthy of winning game of the year if it does for us, or anyone else. And I think it's just a fabulous game.
This is gameplay minutia, but like in Persona 3, 4, 5, if you say the right thing in a conversation, it'll give you bonuses towards towards that social link. If you say the wrong thing, it can set you back in that character's path towards the social link or the confidant or whatever game you're playing. But in this game, if you say the best answer, instead of moving you faster in the story, you just get some bonus job experience points. So it's like they still reward you for saying the right thing, but they don't penalize you for saying the wrong thing. And it's a gentler path to getting everything done that you want to get done, but still the amount of things to do is staggering. There's a bunch of side quests and hidden boss fights with tangible rewards. And some of those late boss fights are sort of puzzles that need to have specific builds or strategies to win. And I'm saying this in a positive way. And the dungeons and maps are so elaborate. Like holy crap! There's something like maybe 6 big dungeons and a dozen or so small ones in this game, but they all feel fully realized. Where in the 2010s and 2020s, RPG dungeons are sometimes just big empty corridors or empty spaces connected by a bridge or something. These feel like dungeon-ass dungeons in a way that I was sometimes in awe by. Although the last couple are a little bit of a shrug, but and I think the ending is a little bit too neat and clean for how messy and nuanced the story of this game is. But yeah, Metaphor of Fantasio, one of the best games Sega Atlas has ever made. One of my contenders for Game of the Year, alongside Veilguard, Infinite Wealth, and Rebirth. It's perhaps unfairly, I really, really latched on to 4 gigantic AAA RPGs this year, but it's kind of insane that we got 4 AAA RPGs this good this year.
How often do we get great, like 4 great AAA RPGs? Like this has been a great year for RPGs.
I mean, just sort of sticking to the biggest blockbusters, Baldur's Gate 3 last year really felt like a special game, and nothing else like that came out. And 2 years ago, Elden Ring was probably the biggest dominant RPG, or maybe Elden Ring and Tears of the Kingdom. But we got 4 of these, and that is wild. I mean, my game of the year last year was Octopath Traveler 2. I love that game. I'm not sure how it would do against this slate because 2024 was so good. But we've talked a lot about these 10 games so far. Metaphor of Fantasio, East 10 Nordics, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D, Dragon Age The Veilguard, Visions of Mana, Unicorn Overlord, Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and Fallout London. Those aren't the only 10 RPGs that came out this year. Before we move into the housekeeping portion of the podcast, does anyone want to give a quick 1 or 2 sentence shout out to another game that came out this year? And even if it's not 100% an RPG, I'll allow it just this once.
So, I reviewed 2 new games this year for RPG Fan, right? And the other one after Unicorn Overlord, or really before it, was the Another Code remaster, which is the visual novel side of what we do. But Another Code Recollection was a great remake. It is kind of just a total reimagining. I'm not sure I like it more than the original DS game. But I was really, really happy with it. You know, it was the kind of thing that would be very easy to mess it up, and it was great. I also think that there's got to be a shout out to the new Sheeran game, Serpentine.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm
Serpent
so
Coil
excited to play
Island.
that one. Oh man.
Yeah. Ben reviewed that for the site, and he gave it like over a 95 or something.
It's like a 98, I think.
Yeah. Sheeran people love the new one.
Yeah, like I went out and bought it because of Ben's review. Like, really pushed me to prioritize it. And yeah, I'm not good at it at all, but it's excellent.
I think when I read Ben's review, I saw that the previous one, Tower of Fortune, Dice of Fate, was on sale for $5 on the Switch, and then I got that instead in retaliation. So maybe that'll
Makes sense.
Maybe that'll happen for me in 2025 because 2024 was too crowded for me to put a lot of time into a sheer end game.
There are 2 I'm going to shout out. One that is, it would be kind of weird if we never talked about it, which is Black Myth Wukong. The discourse about Black Myth is exhausting. And I really don't know what to think of it. So I'm going to put that over here for a second. And Black Myth is like a game that is designed exclusively for me. It's like 100 bosses that are like all different and all really interesting. But there are major problems with Black Myth that hold it back. Input delay, issues with that. But it's still like a super gorgeous game that has amazing boss fights. And that's a pretty fun game. And I also am literally in the final dungeon of Fantasian Neo Dimension, or whatever they're calling it now, the remaster of the of the two parts of Fantasian from Apple Arcade. And I know that everybody talks about just how freaking challenging it is, and it is a hard RPG. But it's not that hard. And I hate to be one of those guys like, oh, like it's not that hard, but it's the truth. Like if you like puzzle based turn based RPGs where you really have to think about like your loadout and your kit before every single fight, and they give you the tools to change it in any way you want before any fight, then Fantasian is a phenomenal RPG on that front. The story is trash. The dioramas are cool but annoying to navigate. But the turn-based combat is like it's not as good as like a dragon, because like a dragon's doing so many different things, but like in terms of like pure strategy and how much you have to think about every single fight, but like in a way that I find just addicting, it's phenomenal. So those are the two that I'll shout out.
It's not an RPG, but Balatro is pretty good.
I was hoping someone would bring up Balatro.
Yeah, I've managed to wean myself off Balatro. I think I mentioned this on another podcast because my iCloud save data got corrupted when I tried putting it on my iPhone, so I lost like all of my progress, and I was like, "Oh, time to get off this train." But yeah, Balatro's really, really good. It's really good. I also played. This didn't come out this year. No, this came out a few years ago. Can I mention something that came out that I played this year that was really, really great that I'd like to...
Well, the name of the podcast is Retro Encounter, so I'll allow it just this once.
Okay. So I played Final Fantasy VI T Edition. It was a ROM hack, and it was awesome. It was really good. It added a lot of lore friendly content to Final Fantasy VI that in some cases, like I know it was never there because I know Final Fantasy VI like the back of my hand, but like little changes, like to get an Esper, you need to fight them and beat them. So it's a boss battle. So it puts a little bit of a skill ceiling there. And it was great. Like if anyone's looking to play Final Fantasy VI again, I highly recommend this particular ROM hack. It really livened up my run through in a way that made Final Fantasy VI feel fresh again. And to the point where I finished it, I was still craving more. So I played Octopath 2. I highly recommend
Which is an excellent game.
It's such a surprising improvement over the original without radically overhauling it.
I liked Octopath 1 okay. I think Octopath 2 is brilliant. One of the best Team Asano games, maybe the best one.
It's so good. It was what did I label it? In our personal year, I always have best game that didn't come out in 2024 that I played in 2024, and that's my entry this year because it's really good.
I would be remiss, like I could bring up like 10 games here. This year has been ridiculous outside of RPGs as well. But it would be silly not to bring up the fact that, we talked about Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D, but there are so many good remakes, remasters, reissues, whatever you want to call these games. Atlas gave us 2 with Persona 3 Reload and Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. 2 games that vastly improve on 2 already very strong entries into their respective franchises. And that's not even going into Romancing Saga 2, a game which I haven't played, but I have watched a friend play a fair amount of. We got a Castlevania collection of games that we've been waiting for a long time.
Those are so good.
Yep.
We're going to take you for a ride. I mean, we got... I'm gonna take you for a ride.
Are you saying that because we got the Marvel fighting the Capcom versus Marvel collection this year?
I might be because I can play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 online for the first time in my life.
I can introduce the entire world to the Marvel vs. Capcom 1 Mega Man meta.
Oh my god, it's ridiculous.
I mean, if we just want to talk about fighting games, I could give that another podcast. But there's 2 games I want to shout out here that I don't think quite have reviews on RPG Fan for different reasons. The first is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which came out earlier this year in I think January or February. It doesn't have a ton of RPG elements. It's more like a Metroid game where you can get a lot of different skills and moves and health upgrades, but there aren't like RPG levels or skill trees. So we didn't cover it, but it's an absolutely outstanding Metroidvania style game. The platforming is intense and challenging. The boss fights are awesome. It makes me very sad that Ubisoft shut down the Montpellier studio right after it came out, because that's the same studio that gave us all those really good 2D Rayman games from the last couple of years. But yeah, if you want a buttery smooth Prince of Persia action game that is full of like dashes and counters and flying and Iranian mythology, then The Lost Crown is absolutely killer. And the other one is a game that's only in early access now, but Hades 2 entered early access in the spring, I think, and it's by far the game that I have watched the most videos of without having played it. Because I don't want to enter an early access for any game, frankly, but I am so excited by everything that game is doing that I am going to be first in line to get its 1.0 version when that happens. Uh, Oh man, I don't want to get into it without spoiling it, but it's unmistakably Hades, but dozens of new characters. Melanoy has 6 weapons that are completely different from Zagreus's toolkit. It's way less dash heavy than Hades one, since the dash sprint sort of is a different kind of gameplay. And characters from Greek myth, like the cutest little spider girl version of Arachne that you can ever possibly imagine. Will weave you a dress that gives you armor bonuses if you talk to her in the dungeon. There's sort of 2 dungeon paths instead of 1, but going beyond that would be a spoiler. It, Everything Hades 2 is doing has me so excited, but I haven't played it yet because it's only in early access.
I can say that Alana has played all of it and she loves it. So that's all I can say. I'm waiting for it to release, though. I will
Yeah,
play
I'm
the
waiting for
hell
the
out of
full
it.
release for a console.
Yeah,
version.
I was waiting for full release too.
Yep.
But
As
I will
soon as
say,
as soon as it gets a release date, that is my most anticipated game. Unless
Oh, for sure.
unless
Yeah.
something insane happens, like Dragon Quest 12 is happening next month.
I will say, take a quick peep for those of you that do love Hades. Underrated little gem came out on Switch, was ported to Switch this year. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate. Very much takes the Hades formula. Not quite as good, but it makes up for it by having couch co-op and a Ninja Turtle skin over top of it. Most fun I've had multiplayer this year, and I had a fair amount of multiplayer good experiences this year.
Oh, around 2 years ago, I played a non-trivial amount of Shredder's Revenge with some of my friends online.
It's so
It's a
good.
great game.
That game is great, and if they're making Ninja Turtles great again, then maybe that's a slogan I could get behind.
I honestly think Splintered Fate is part of that trend of like, oh, we're getting good Turtles games again. It's it's kind of a port from an Apple Arcade game. It's got some jank that is continually being patched about that, but that does not stop it from being one of the most fun Ninja Turtles games I've ever played.
But can I give Michelangelo a Poseidon dash that inflicts rupture on my foes?
Not Rupture, but a functionally yes, you can give him a Poseidon dash.
Hell yes.
I always play as Mikey. He is so fun in that game. Because that's the thing. 4 turtles means 4 completely different play styles as well.
Yeah, I guess instead of a roguelike where you have different starting weapons, you have a different starting turtle.
Exactly.
and you're saying that there's good co-op attached to it too. All right, that is exciting. But if we wanted to talk about all of our favorite 2024 games, we could be here all day. Maybe eventually we could even get to talking about Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, but we had a spoiler cast in I think June for that, for any interested parties. Yeah, but listeners, we've gone for over 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining us on this rambling, non-linear journey through 2024. 2024 was loaded with excellent RPGs, and we talked about several of them. hopefully cogently, hopefully that makes you more interested instead of ready for this year to be over. But I had a really good time sharing these thoughts and ideas with you. And thank you so much, Zach, Wes, Jono, and Josh, for putting up with me for these few hours and talking about your thoughts on the game's releases, because frankly, there was so much to talk about. I'm glad that we got 5 voices on this podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. It was a blast.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
Anytime.
And listeners, you might have noticed at the beginning of this episode that this is episode number 449. That is shockingly close to 450. And RPG Fan does do something special every 50 episodes. But that's what's coming next week. But putting that on hold for a moment, following episode 450, we're doing 2 episodes on Final Fantasy IX. They will be coming out in later in January. Final Fantasy IX is a game beloved by many in the Final Fantasy fandom, but it was a real discussion, sort of whether it was not enough like 7 or 8 back in the day. I'm not sure exactly how that conversation is going to go in a few weeks. But FF9 is awesome, and I know that there's going to be a really good discussion on it over the course of 2 episodes later in January. But if you want to reach out to the podcast, whether it's about 2024 games or Final Fantasy IX or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the best way to reach us is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow RPG Fan on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, or rpgfan.com itself, always called either RPG Fan or rpgfan.com. And on rpgfan.com itself, there are features, reviews, podcasts, and more every single day. RPGFan.com also has a shop. If you go to rpgfan.com/shop, there are 2 storefronts, one hosted by TeePublic, where you can get RPG Fan apparel and accessories, and another hosted by Hyperplay RPG, where you can get the RPG Fan Reviews Collection, a 300-page tome of dozens and dozens of RPG Fan reviews from over the years. Please support RPG Fan however you choose, especially if it ends up paying us money. But also on rpgfan.com are 2 other podcasts. One is Random Encounter, every 2 weeks about current events and what we're playing, usually hosted by you, Jono.
Yeah, we talked about it early on. It's the big year ender where we talk about what we're looking forward to in the upcoming year, and that uses the our big feature that's spearheaded by Zach, our most anticipated games of 2025, as like a basis. So if you enjoyed that podcast, absolutely check out the feature, because there are some really, really great write-ups and great thoughts from people about what they're really excited for coming up.
Right on. And also, in addition to Random and Retro Encounters, there's Rhythm Encounter every alternating 2 weeks about RPG music. You can review or listen to Random, Retro, and Rhythm Encounters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, however you listen to podcasts. We'd love for you to listen, and we'd love it even more if you provide 5 out of 5-star feedback. But I glossed over episode 450 a few moments ago. It is going to be a farewell episode. I am retiring from running the Retro Encounter podcast after episode 450. I've been thinking about it a lot over the years, and especially this year, and decided that I wanted to finish out 2024 with a good podcast every week, and I've done my best in trying to deliver that. But I'm ready to stop podcasting every week and spend more time with my friends, family, and pets. So I'm not leaving RPG Fan permanently. I am going to probably show up on some 2025 episodes, but it will be as a showrunner, not a guest, because I'm departing as showrunner, and my replacement is none other than Zach Wilkerson. So starting with the Final Fantasy IX episodes, Zach, you are the official showrunner of RPG Fans Retro Encounter, and we'll talk about that in more detail next week.
Yeah, I don't know what to say right now, so I'll wait until next week, where I will not know what to say again. So there we go.
Consistency is good.
Yeah,
in hosting a podcast.
Not knowing what to say is great for a host.
For 3 weeks in a row, we just won't know what to say and try anyway.
So tune in next week for 2 hours of sad sobbing.
Yeah, it's going to be 2 hours of reminiscing and apologizing and struggling to find the words.
Yeah,
it's like a podcast where the entire episode is you're trying to remember something that's at the tip of your tongue. Just complete mental hell.
I will be jumping in at the end of this to Send in the Clowns to show you off, so just be prepared for that.
I was about to say, you know what you're doing, Sollosi? You're pulling a Carson. You're leaving at the height of the popularity. You're not sticking around until it gets old. You're taking your bow and you're getting out of there, leaving everyone wanting more.
Oh, well, that's great! I could play "Take a Bow" or "Vitamin C's Graduation" at the end of that episode. That will perfectly.
Absolutely do not play the Vitamin C song. It got ruined during our years in high school, Sollosi,
Oh,
and
I was gonna say,
it.
I'm exactly the right age to both love
Me
and
too.
hate that song.
Exactly.
100%, yes.
But anyway, I can guarantee there will not be any song by Vitamin C, whether it's "Vacation" or "Graduation," at the in next episode.
As
But
we go on.
oh no, I really don't want to edit that in. But yeah, next episode is going to be a farewell episode. I'm not gone for good. I'm just gone from running this show every single week. But if you want to reach out to me or any of the panelists as individuals, let's tell the listeners how they can find us on social media or otherwise online. Starting with you, Wes.
You can find me on Blue Sky at Lone Weasel, and only there because the bad place is gone.
I even regret mentioning the bad place by name 5 minutes ago, but we're going to leave it there. Josh, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm Watcher Joshua, also on Blue Sky. You can also find me on Thread still.
Right on. Jono, how can listeners find you?
You can send me a message at jlogan@rpgfan.com. If you're wanting to send stuff to Random Encounter, you could do so at podcast@rpgfan.com. And you can also find me on Blue Sky at johnlogan.bsky.social.
Now, Zach.
You can email me, zachw@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on Discord as ZachW, and I guess soon enough, I'll be checking the retro@rpgfan email account. So
get ready for a lot of emails of casinos asking to advertise on the podcast.
Can't wait.
But listeners, you can find me pretty easily on the internet on Blue Sky, Instagram, and RPG Fans Discord. On all three places, I am at Evoker for Dogs. And even though I'm named after a Persona 3 thing, I somehow went through 2024 without playing Persona 3 Reload.
It's good.
I've heard that. I just couldn't fit it in. It came out in January, like
it's almost like it's 75 hours.
Yeah, it's 75 hours, and I was right in between two 100-hour games, both of which I did play.
Metaphor's basically the same thing.
Well, Persona 3 guy and Metaphor guy both have similar blue hair and blank expressions on their faces. I'm probably not even the 1 billionth person to make that comparison. But listeners, thank you, good night, and good luck.